What's up, folks? It's Mike here with Irish Sports Daily. We're going to have Power Hour today with my good buddy, Jamie Uyeyama, and it's a great day to be an Irish fan because only a few more weeks here, Yama, and we get to go and watch this team play, and I can't wait. We're kind of in the what I call the dog days of camp. It's about going to end, I think. I believe they probably have their camp ending here this weekend coming up, and then it's just focus on Wisconsin. So there really isn't a ton to talk about, but we had a few viewing sessions since last time, all that kind of stuff. And so we'll kind of get into some of the commentary by some of the coaches and all that type of stuff, and maybe what we've learned over the last week. Before we get going, wanted to mention once again, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. Go to the front page, click on the premium section, sign up. We got a great season lined up. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy the environment that we have there, our community. I think you'll really enjoy talking with Irish fans. So if you would, please sign up if you haven't. Also wanted to mention our other sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing, founded by NDL alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches, from All-Americans to All-Pros, the associates to CEOs. You're in great hands with ESQ's custom clothing. Whether you're looking for a perfect fitting suit, a standout sport coat, or a perfect tuxedo for weddings, galas, ESQ's master tailors blend traditional hand stitching in each garment with Italy and England's best fabrics. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com and book an appointment to mention your to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right. So Yama, again, there's just not a lot going on right now. I'd say the good news is so far, Matty Augustine seems to be the only real injury that's happened. So that's good. Let's keep knocking on wood with that. We got a look on Sunday to kind of get an idea of the walking wounded. And yeah, there's a couple guys who have some dings and things like this. And then, of course, Quincy Porter not being back healthy, but there's certainly been some great news with, KVA now being cleared for all contact, Austin Craig, all contact, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of good news that's come out of camp as well. So to me, I mean, right now, I think we're in about as good situation as we could hope for. Really, the only negatives would be, again, Matty Augustine, and I would have loved to seen that be a competition. I would have loved to see it. I think it would have helped both players. They would have advanced. I'm sure Sullivan Abshert's going to do whatever he can to improve as much as he can. But then it'll be interesting to see what they do. Is if Otting is playing as well as we think he is and have heard, you've brought up the possibility that Ashton Craig could potentially move to guard and maybe even compete there. I don't know. What would you do here? What would you do if you're Joe Rudolph?
I mean, I think it all depends on Otting, right? I think that's the thing. It's really like a competition now, I think, between Otting and Absher, and which one of those guys is the best at their position, because we know that Ashton Craig is going to be a starter in like they consider him one of the best 5. So now it's just who is the best out of the 5? Is it Otting or is it Absher? And I know those guys play the different positions, but it's really going to be about which one of those guys is best and which one of those guys is best together. Like, what's the drop off if Craig goes from center to guard? I think Craig will probably be able to play guard at a pretty high level, still be a very good player there. Maybe he's a better fit at center, but I don't think it's anything like moving Zeke Correll. Like Rudolph said too, Craig was working at guard before he was a center. Like, he was someone who they originally thought was going to be a guard. It wasn't like he came in and they said right away he's going to be a center. And so it's just going to be about whether or not they feel who's the best 5 kind of working together. Craig has already been cleared, so you have to figure that at least in this scrimmage, they're going to give him at least a little bit of a look. Like the scrimmage that we assume is going to, usually you end camp with a scrimmage. So they're going to have a scrimmage. You're going to give them at least a little bit of a look there and kind of see. It's kind of what they did last year when they were finding out what's going to happen at left guard. And like Will Black was getting work with the ones and all that. Like they had all different scenarios there where they were going to find out who the best person was. And I think that's what you're going to kind of see there. They're going to kind of mix and match there and see, because they have to figure it out. Before they get into Wisconsin prep, you don't want to be in a situation where, game week, you're still figuring out who the right guy is.
Yeah, I think it's this week, right? You got to make a decision this week. And I think that's pretty much everything. You're going to have what is known as the Jersey scrimmage, which is kind of the last one before fall camp ends, or, and so you're going to have to make some decisions about a lot of things. Who's your number 2 quarterback? And they probably won't announce that. I don't think they'll probably announce that until the week of the game. I couldn't imagine they would, and there's really no incentive to. So, backup quarterback's certainly going to be something that everybody's looking at. What happens here at the O-line, all that type of stuff. The Porter situation, it's interesting because when this was all coming down, Matt Freeman, who we know is an outstanding insider, not just in Notre Dame, but all across the country. He has just really great connections and insights to a lot of people, including people at Ohio State. And I remember Matt saying, this may be a little bit longer injury than people think. And Matt's right. Once again, Matt is right. And so when he comes back, I don't know. Here's the good news, and this is good news because it has been consistent, Jamie, and we've even seen video evidence of it as well recently in Notre Dame, releasing videos and stuff like that. But by all accounts, Micah Gilbert is really taken a big step forward, and they need him to do that because Porter's not going to be there. They need a boundary receiver, but Jerome Bettis Jr. has taken a big step as well. We've seen that Greathouse could potentially play there as well. So I think they're going to be okay there. But I think the biggest news is, despite the disappointing Porter update on the situation, just Micah Gilbert, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. And as I mentioned, even during the summer, when I did some digging on, what was going on behind the scenes, that was one of the very first things that I was told by somebody who would absolutely 100% know the situation. And that person said, yeah, he has really ascended and become quite the player. Another guy that they mentioned was Kedron Young is a guy who's starting to emerge. And then again, I started doing some digging over the weekend, talking to some people, and I've heard, don't count this guy out. I know a lot of people talking about Jonas Walton is a possible third back, but don't count out Kedron Young. I've heard very, very good things about him and his health and his commitment, and he's looked good. I even heard Javian Osborne's looked good. Had a good day. So I think they're going to be in good position. I'm not concerned about it. It's just really important that Micah Gilbert and really Jerome Bettis Jr. step up and do what they've done. And it seems that that's been the case. We know they're going to be fine at slot. We know they're going to be fine at field. It's just kind of boundary and who's going to go get those contested catches and come down with them. And the video evidence, we've seen a great. We've seen Gilbert Sky above, Tay Johnson, and I think it was Sanders that was covering him at the time, and come down with the ball, and just heard a lot of good things about him. So I think that's encouraging. Heard very good things about CJ Carr as well. Heard he's very much on point and looking very, very good. So again, I'm encouraged. I'm very encouraged by what I've seen here and heard. It's going to be until you actually know you've seen it. It's hard to know exactly what you're looking at when you're playing against yourself. And I think we found that out a little bit in the Miami game. I certainly underestimated them. I didn't expect Notre Dame to play the way they did, though, either. I did not expect them to do a lot of the things that they did in those games, which I think cost them the game. But again, you got a brand new defensive coordinator playing with guys he doesn't know. You got a first-time starting quarterback. I'm sure both coordinators would like to have those games back. I'm sure they'd probably call it differently if they had the opportunity. But that kind of gets to my next point here, Jamie, which I don't usually go around looking for what the national media is saying about Notre Dame, all the talking heads, stuff like that. Even, some of the other sites who do what we do, talking about Notre Dame, but because I know that they don't know Notre Dame as well as we know Notre Dame. So I don't really pay much attention to them, but just kind of going around. I mean, it seems like Notre Dame's got a lot of good buzz in the national media, but everybody also has their doubts about Notre Dame because of what's happened, in the past. And those early September struggles that Marcus Freeman's had, I mean, that's just fact. That's just what it is. So I understand why they're having those concerns. I don't have them. Because I know what the coach is and I know where this program is, but I understand why they're having them. But it's interesting because even on Irish Sports Daily, there's a thread on the members board there talking about, are we overlooking Wisconsin? And I don't think that they're overlooking Wisconsin. I really don't, because I just don't think that Wisconsin's going to have the offensive firepower to play with Notre Dame. I just don't think that they will. And it may look tough for a half, but I think Notre Dame will definitely pull away. I'll be surprised if Notre Dame doesn't win by 21 points over Wisconsin. I really will. But I don't know. Just get your thoughts on that. Are we eating too much of the cake here? Are we too positive about this team? And do you think there is concern for maybe we're overlooking some things?
I would say that, I mean, there are people like when Greg and I did our show after the first practice, and I mean, we praised the team, and obviously we're excited about the talent and all that. But there were like people who were like, they're going to score 50 on Wisconsin. I'm like, well, they scored 50 like 3 times the previous year, even though they put up a lot of points in a lot of games. They scored 53 times, and probably not going to do it against Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's defense is going to be good. Like, I think they're going to be good. They're going to be probably better than a lot of people think. And they're going to be competitive. And I think that game also means a lot to Luke Fickell. Like, I think it means a lot to him. And not just like his, for his job status and all that too, but like they need to be competitive in that game. They need to be competitive in that game. And there's a lot of stuff that just going against his protege and all that. There's a lot there that matters. A whole bunch of guys left his staff to go to Notre Dame.
Yeah,
I mean, you should be extra motivated, right? I do think that. So maybe people are overlooking Wisconsin, and like I think they're going to be more competitive in a lot of ways. I don't think that like the Notre Dame media or like us are overhyping the talent that Notre Dame has, or I don't believe that to be the case, Mike,
I agree.
Because we've done this so many other years too, where we've been pretty freaking honest about how like, hey, they're really good here, but we got some big questions here, and we don't know, and they need a lot of things to go right here. And the questions now are just small questions. And even if you bringing up the boundary thing, that was one of the biggest questions going into camp. And obviously, you have to see it play out on a Saturdays. But you're feeling pretty positive about where they're at now compared to when they started camp. Like, definitely positive, even without Quincy Porter being healthy. So I don't think people are overhyping Notre Dame. I think it's totally different if you look at Wisconsin, especially when you mentioned the offense, Mike. Like, obviously, I've been doing a lot of work on Wisconsin, getting ready for the game too. They got a lot of issues on offense. Like, to say that they are inadequate at receiver is being nice to them. They don't have the talent at receiver. They have like no power forward production at receiver at all. A whole bunch of guys that they're counting on to be their number one guys that have done nothing, and are guys who are like fourth, fifth year guys at their school who have done nothing. And I think they could have a chance to have a good running game, but they also are like banged up a little bit on the offensive line, and they don't have the depth there. They also haven't, it's not like Joe Rudolph was there and he's like, have these guys where he's been working with them for years and years. They don't have that. They had to go to the portal and add a lot of guys there. And who knows how those guys are going to be, because it's not like they're getting Jordan Seaton from, Colorado and paying $4 million a year for him. Like, that's not who they're getting in the portal. So, and the quarterback, I think he does make them way better than they were, because he's a very, very good athlete. He's also been trash against any defense. Throwing the ball, he's been trash. He can still run it, but throwing the ball, he's been trash against any defense with a pulse. It's just a fact of what it is. And you'd say, oh, well, now he's going to play with better talent at Wisconsin. Maybe not
sure.
really. Not really.
At wide receiver,
running
sure.
backs. Definitely. At wide receiver, no, I don't believe so. So
yeah,
I really don't think I don't think it's comparable to saying like you're opening the season at Ohio State, at Texas A&M, at Miami. It's not even in the same ballpark, right? So I don't think people are. Yes, they need to take it seriously. Obviously, Notre Dame's going to take it seriously, but I don't think people are. It's hyperbolic to say that, hey, Notre Dame should win the game by convincing margin. They're better than Wisconsin. They're much better.
Yeah, there's no question. I see a 38-10 type of game. That's kind of what I see. Just kind of what I see, and it's hard to know. It's hard to know until you actually watch your team. But I'll say this: if I had a concern, if I had any concern, I know people are going to say that, why would he be concerned about that? But I'm just not 100% sold on this offensive line yet. I'm just not, right? And because I want to see it. And when I see, I want to see what Gerby looks like. I want to see what Will Black looks like at a left tackle. And, I know he's going to be fine there with Knapp, but it's going to take some time. I want to see what they do with whether Absher's a guy or it's Craig or, Otting starts at center. I want to see that. And I don't have any doubt that they'll be good as time goes on. I really don't have any doubt about that. I think they'll be fine in that regard once they get, a couple games under their belt. But it could be just a little bit of a hiccup here and there. There's just going to be a couple blown assignments and things like that. That's just part of one, first games. It's also part of two, guys playing for the very first time and or guys who really haven't played a lot playing again. And getting used to that kind of speed and that type of thing. So I think they're going to be fine at everywhere else. I really do. I don't think that I have any sort of concerns about anywhere else other than, offensive line. And I'm not overly concerned about that. I think that that's the one thing that concerns me. And then, of course, if something were to happen to CJ, it's not going to be good. It's just not going to be good. It's too much to ask to have a guy like Noah Grubbs or Teddy Gerard come in and start. It's just, it would be disastrous. It really would be. They'd play okay, and they'd win games and stuff like that. I'm not saying that they'd be completely dead in the water, but it just would not.
They're not winning a national championship.
No. Teddy Gerard or Noah Grubbs, and again, that's not a disrespect to them. They wouldn't have won the national championship.
They're true freshmen.
I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't have won the national championship with CJ Carr as a true freshman. That would not have happened, and that's as talented as CJ Carr is.
Yeah,
you could have taken if Carr was a true freshman this year and started and had the same talent, it would not look that great.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't. Go ahead.
Also, too, I know of like going way back, right? This isn't that far back, but Tommy Rees, when he was a freshman and he had to come in, and obviously he won games and was serviceable as for a freshman, but there was going to be a ceiling there, and not just because of his physical talent, but also he's a freshman. And Matt LaVecchio, like that is going back, but Matt LaVecchio, when he came in and people were like, Matt LaVecchio, hey, they're winning games. There's a reason why Matt LaVecchio didn't keep the job and become this guy. He was the guy who was just like, he can come in, he's not going to make enough mistakes. He's going to do this, and there's limitations to him, but he can just do that. So whoever comes in next, it's not like that person couldn't grow, and I think would grow over the course of the season. But if somebody had to come in like that, you'd expect a very Matt LaVecchio type of thing. Even if these guys are more talented than him, it just means that it would have to start that way. And and when you're like that, you limit everything that you can do on offense, and you have to shrink everything down. And obviously Notre Dame has a defense where they could win enough games to still maybe even be a playoff team. Like that could happen, but it just would be just really, really hard to get to that place. It's like Gunnar Stockton when he had to come in against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Well, Gunnar Stockton last year was a much different player than the player he was in that Sugar Bowl, right? So I think that's just kind of where it's at with that. And I would agree with you, the offensive line. I think people expect like I saw, it's like Greg and I said this on Hidden Hustle last week too, that people expect the offensive line, like they're going to come out and just dominate right away. That's never how it works. Even if you have everybody back, it's always a process, and your line is going to get better throughout the course of the year. And so there's going to be some growing pains. There always is. And especially when you have two new guys who are starting at tackle. I know Lambert played last year at guard, but he's starting his first year out of tackle. There's going to be some growing pains. Now, when you have CJ Carr, that means the ball's going to be out on time, all this. So there's going to be times where they get beat and it won't matter because the ball's out and they're fine. But, there are going to be things where you're going to see them in that first couple weeks, even against like Rice, which, they should dominate, whatever. They might have some hiccups here and there. But the thing is that once you get through September, you want to see them. Wow, they've really made a jump, because you're starting Will Black at left tackle because you want him to be, by the time you get to the Miami game, you're like, oh, Will Black is the guy we thought he was going to be at that point. That's what matters. And going forward, obviously.
Yeah. BYU as well. I think that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it'll be, I don't know. I'm excited about it. I can't wait for the season to start. I've seen Notre Dame anywhere from somebody thinking Notre Dame could win it all to in the top 5 or 6. I just don't think these preseason rankings mean anything. They just don't. But I do think it says a lot about Marcus Freeman's program and the culture that he's built, that's where they're at now. And I think they're going to consistently be there moving forward. They're going to be one of those 5 or 6 teams that are talked about every single year going into it. And so that's where we're at. Before, and in previous coaching staffs, it'd be, okay, well, we may start off at 20 and we can try and rise to maybe make the playoff and then see what happens. Now the expectations are there, and that's good. I'm sure Marcus Freeman wants to embrace those expectations, because that is how you continually set the standard, right? You continually raise the bar by saying, hey, you know, we're one of the 5 best teams in the country. You know, that's who we are. But we feel we're number one, and we're going to finish to play. And it's interesting because I think that, from my understanding, just based off of things I've heard, it seems like Marcus Freeman has really dialed this group into thinking this is a 16 game season, right? It's not a 12 game season. This is a 16 game season. And we're going to be playing in the national championship game for the national championship. And I like that. I love that. I think that that's exactly the mindset you got to have. And, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of talking about national championship. Don't be afraid of talking about this is our goal. And anything less than this is unsatisfactory. And again, raising the bar, setting the standard. And I think it's important to constantly condition your team to understand that that is the expectation, and that's what we're playing for. So I think what you'll see is, and again, this is why I love the way the schedule breaks. You're going to be able to play a lot more depth because your focus is, one, you don't have to worry about the 4 games with freshmen. You can play younger players, and you can play them earlier. You can play them all throughout the year, but also, prepare yourself so we don't see the CJ or the Christian Gray that we saw the last 2 years, which is a guy who just had way too many reps and just a body who was worn down. So that's why you go get McKinney. That's why you go get Sanders. That's why you coach up, Zachary, and coach up Dallas Golden, and say, hey guys, this is your opportunity. So I'm excited that they're going to be able to have the opportunity to play this depth, because it will help, especially if they get some injuries down the road. So I know a lot of people, and we've been back and forth on the schedule. This is going to help the team. I really believe in that. A lot of these young guys are going to play. They're going to get a lot of experience. And then if something happens to somebody, they're not going to come in completely green and ready to, they'll be ready to go. And so, we'll just have to see what happens and go from there. I did like seeing Nevada Irish's comments. No ranking should exist until week 6. I agree with that. 100% agree with that. I don't think I'd even make it half the season, to be honest with you, because you just until teams start playing each other. And, because if you look at the first 6 games for, Georgia and Texas, and I guess not Texas, but, a lot of these other schools, Indiana, certainly, they don't play anybody. So you don't really know anything about them until they actually start playing somebody with a pulse. And so 6 weeks is a good number, but, I'd probably go half season. I really would. So they'd actually played somebody with a pulse before you actually ranked them. So I do think that that's a good idea. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
Yeah, the ranking stuff, like, I think it's been obvious that even the committee doesn't care about how it's ranked by the media and stuff anyways. Like, they just kind of go off their own thing. So I mean, I completely ignore, like, I don't care about, like, where Notre Dame is ranked by the AP or the coaches poll heading into the season. I mean, I think probably 10 years ago it was a lot different, but just it's not even on my radar anymore. Like, I don't care about that at all. And I do think, like, that 16 game approach, I think, is the exact same, is the exact way to do it, because they have to take it week by week, and they have to, obviously they're going to leave no doubt is the big motto for the year, the mantra for the year. And that's going to be a week by week thing. And you have to take every game seriously. And in order to get to 16 games, hey, you got to take care of business during your 12 game regular season. But I think it's just a fact that if you look at where things are, like, if you look at how Ohio State won the national championship in 2024, well, one of the things is they lost to Michigan, but when they came into the playoff, they were a totally different team. And they played different too, because they all of a sudden were, hey, we're going to use 2 tight ends a lot. And they were like, they went from a really, like, spread it out team to a 12 personnel team. I mean, they still chucked it deep. Jeremiah Smith still scored a bunch of touchdowns. Emeka Ibuka was still a big deal. they still play with 3 wide receivers, but they also like ran the football in a different way and were more physical, and it changed how it is. So, and I think that's one of the things that we kind of talked about last year with James Flanagan. He could have been somebody who would have been a difference maker in terms of what they would do with the run game and all that. So I think there's a lot of things this year where, especially with freshmen, Mike, with the no 5-for-5 rule, it just opens the door for so much to happen in the second half of the season. So, Aiden Pouncey, who we just everybody saw, like we heard he had a great scrimmage. They showed the clips. He had 2 picks in the scrimmage. It's not kind of surprising at all. Obviously,
No.
I thought he was a top 30 kid in the class. He's an outstanding player. There was another clip of him just like last week too, where he lit up Osborne on this tackling drill. You're like, man, this guy is a player. He is an absolute baller, and it's just going to be a matter of time for him. So he might not be in the mix right now, but if he all of a sudden becomes somebody later on, where it wouldn't shock anyone, and that could happen, because now, and where before it was kind of like, well, we've already 7 games into the season. He hasn't done much. Yeah, they don't. Now, if you want to make a jump and you're going to do something, if you approach it like a 16-game season where any of these guys can play, somebody can just step up and they can be the next, Justin Ross, right? You can change how you play based on the personnel if other guys are stepping up in a certain way, right? So that might even be the case with a guy like Rodney Dunham too. If you don't see Rodney Dunham that early, it doesn't mean that he might not be a huge factor later on. There's all of these things that could happen, right? Or if, Brian Jean Marie, was spoke to the media yesterday, and he mentioned Matt Ferrero and talked about how, like, yeah, he's going to help us and he's going to do all these things. Like, well, Matt Ferrero at the beginning of the season, he's the 5th guy right now. Obviously, the other guys have played more. Well, if there's injuries, if there's other things that happen, you just see it out of the course of the season, and it's happened every year. Or KVA as a freshman, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, he's got to get on the field more, and he's got it. That happens all the time. And I think there's just enough guys on the so-called back end of the roster, the guys who are in the 2 deep or on the fringe of the 2 deep, that are going to have a chance to really be difference makers later on. And some of that stuff, that the work they get in throughout, because they know it's a 16-game season, is going to pay off.
Yeah. A couple other topics I want to get back to Porter. And, I know a lot of people are fascinated with Quincy Porter. I am too. I loved his film in high school. I thought he was a very, very talented player, was going to be a star. I still think he will once he kind of gets everything healed and that type of thing. But I think people think like you can just plug him in there when he's fully healthy and then that he's going to be, as good as Micah Gilbert. I'm sorry. I think people are a little bit dismissive, a little overly optimistic on that. He has no real timing with CJ Carr. I mean, I'm sure they've thrown and this and that, but it's not like he's played and done all this stuff. So even if Porter can come back and say he's ready to go by game 2, you're probably not going to see him a whole lot until he can get some opportunities. But again, this is why it's important, and I think it goes to somebody just like you mentioned with, say, Aiden Pouncey. And so here's the scenario I want to bring and why it's important to play these challenging games at first. Okay. So let's just say Notre Dame's playing Rice and they blow out Rice. Leonard Moore's out of the game second quarter, certainly by half. And they sit Christian Gray, they sit, all these guys that are starters. And then you get to see what Mark Zachary looks like this year. You'll get to see, whether if Dallas Golden doesn't win it, you'll get to see what Dallas Golden looks like, right? And so say he plays a little bit and you watch him. Well, what if all of a sudden they bring in Aiden Pouncey in the fourth quarter and they let Aiden Pouncey play and they look at what he looks like. What if he has a pick? What if he starts making plays? You know, it's kind of like what we saw last year, when we saw some guys like Ethan Long just all of a sudden just get in the game and then starts making plays. Nobody was talking about Ethan Long. Nobody was talking about him in the fall camp right now at this time last year. But we saw him do a few things, and then all of a sudden he gets in the games and starts doing things, and you're like, well, maybe Ethan Long's a lot better than we thought. And it also gives the coaches the opportunity to take a look. And so, maybe Mark Zachary suddenly gets beat out by Aiden Pouncey. Maybe that's a possibility, or Dallas Golden or somebody else. And so that's why I think it's important to have these games. And so you get an opportunity to look. So you really kind of know who is the next guy, because you can't really know until they play, until they really play. You can watch them practice and say, okay, they look pretty good in practice, but until they play, you just don't know. And so I think that's another thing that is going to be a benefit is, we saw even a guy like Kyle Hamilton, going into the fall camp, nobody thought he'd be the player that he was his first year. Certainly, we thought he was talented, but got him in early and then big.
That he would have been
as
good right away, because that happens with no one. He's like he's a unicorn, right? And although Mike, I do want to fight back against, you did say in camp last year that you had heard Ethan Long was balling.
Yeah, I did.
So so I do want to give you credit for it, because that is something that, I mean, not a lot of people were talking about it, but you did mention, and that was something that obviously we had heard at that time. And then we heard he's a good player. Like he's going to be somebody for Notre Dame. And sure enough, all of a sudden he gets on the field and he's making plays. Right. So, but I think you're exactly right too. If you look at it, say end of the 2023 season, or 2022 season, X Watts starts the last 4 games of the season. And that was kind of his breakout. And obviously that team was much different then. They weren't going into a playoff. Well, now the team is different and they are going to be in a position. So you don't know if somebody might be that X Watts. And then that breakout, instead of X Watts kind of had a mini breakout at the end of last year. Well, that might have happened during a playoff run if they kept playing, right? Like, so I think there's a lot of stuff there that is on the table.
Yeah. It's going to be the best thing is they have all this depth, and the cream is going to rise to the top, right? Sooner or later, the best players are going to rise, and you're going to see it. But just having the opportunity for all these guys to actually show it on game day is really going to help them kind of ascend and also build their confidence. They're going to come in and like, oh man, I went and I played my first college game and I didn't look out of place. If I just dial in here, maybe I can play even sooner than I thought, So these are just opportunities that I think can really help build the culture, but also the depth of your team. And so I'm very, very excited about it. And, talked to some people and just heard some really good things about the team. And my last topic I wanted to ask you about, and then I'll throw a few nuggets out there and then we'll answer some questions. But this is, for the longest time, I always thought it was important. I knew it was important, but I just didn't know how important leadership is on your team. And every year, but going into a season, I go into the season and I say, okay, who are the leaders? Can I easily define these guys? Is it pretty obvious who's going to be the leaders? Because if it is, then I know they have good leadership. If I don't know where it's coming from, then I got concerned. This year, I feel like pretty much every level we know where the leadership is. CJ Carr is going to be a captain and he's going to be a leader and be by far the leader of the offense. You ask Rudolph about it, and obviously he talks about Knapp and, how physical he is and this and that, but Craig's kind of more the more, vocal guy and that type of thing. I think we knew that going in. We know that Faison's going to be a leader there with Greathouse at wide receiver. We knew that. Tight end, we know Coop's going to be that guy. We know Aeneas is that guy. So we knew that going in. And, of course, D-line, And again, by the way, I heard good things about Onye again. That's encouraging. But very good things about Onye and really the whole defensive line in particular. I think they're going to be fine there with leadership. I know they're going to be more than fine at linebacker and more than fine at DB. So, and then you got kicking. I mean, it's just like all the pieces seem to be in place. And leadership, I think, is the one that you just don't know. But to me, um, I think they're going to be fine. I really do. If you're Marcus Freeman, do you let them have as many captains as they had last year? Do you want to kind of get it down to a two or three? What do you want? What do you think on that, Jamie?
I think 2 or 3 is too little, really. I think
Yeah,
usually if you have only 2 or 3 captains, that means you don't have enough leaders,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I always think, and I think really if you look at, say, last year too, and that was one of the things that they probably had more guys that were captain worthy than um than they had at captains. And that's
Yeah.
typically how it goes when the team is good, right? Like that's what kind of matters. And obviously there's different years where you don't know, a lot of the captains leave, and it's different, and you have to see who's going to step up. But when you already have guys like Bowen and Schuler coming back that were captains last year,
Yep.
you have your returning quarterback. You have those veteran guys in the offensive line that you mentioned, as like Jawan Sider mentioned. Aeneas Williams was probably the captain of the running back room. He just didn't have the role for it now. Well, now he's going to have the role, so he's the perfect guy to kind of be like a captain like guy, even if he's not named a captain. So, and I think too, like Eli Raridan isn't maybe like the most vocal guy, and Cooper Flanagan is more of like the fiery kind of
Oh
guy.
yeah.
And but
Oh yeah.
Cooper Flanagan was hurt last year. So now I really do think that like it is as important as captains are and all that. Like, yeah, you want to have that because captains are going to be the front facing guys. But really, it's about having guys within each room and saying
Yep.
like, hey, these are the guys you can point to. And you could say that at every position, literally every position on the team. And I think too, that goes back all the way to um, developing these guys of what the coaches and Marcus Freeman in particular too has done with developing all these guys, but then also evaluating these guys out of high school and finding these guys. Hey, who are these guys that are going to be kind of leaders and help set the culture for you? And they've done that.
Yeah, yeah, no question. All right, we're gonna get to some questions. Before I do, just want to kind of mention some guys I've heard have looked good. I've heard Teddy Gerard's look pretty good so far. Is he going to win number two? I don't know, but I think that he's looked pretty good. We've mentioned Walton and Osborne and Kedron Young. I think that's important that all those guys step up. Um, yeah, I've heard real good things about the freshman wide receivers, but I think a lot of those guys in front are all starting to kind of uh, move and make some noise and stuff like that. So that's very encouraging. I think I've heard Cooper Flanagan starting to kind of get back to the same person he was, but also Ty Washington stepped up a lot. So is Flanagan. But I heard even Jack Larson had a good day the other day. So that they got bodies there and everything. O-line again, it's hard to know because you're going against one of the best defensive linemen in the country, and so there's going to be battles there. But I talked to a person that's been around the program for quite a while and has seen a lot of teams, including the 2024 team that went to the national championship game, and this person said, "Look, it's the defense is just by far the best it's ever been. It's just not even close. Especially D line, especially like interior D line has been, very impressive. And all that competition has happened. Sean Sevillano is a guy that's really starting to emerge, and it's like, but when you got five other guys there that are also competing with you, I think
Yeah.
any other year he'd probably start in a lot of places. Certainly in a lot of teams previously. So, it's encouraging across the board. I've heard very good things about, Jalen Sneed, and like, his ability to communicate and work within what Max Bola wanted done versus Brian Jennings is different. And we've talked about that, Jamie. We're just having a different voice, a different person, somebody give you an opportunity.
Make a huge
And
difference.
yeah, it really does. And it sounds like Snead has really made a big jump. And so that's real encouraging because he is such a great pass rusher that, if you can have him on the field and he's not a liability, he's just cat quick and chase a lot of things down. And it's not so much that you need him to start, but you need him to be able to take some of those meaningful minutes, especially when you're trying to ease KVA into this again. You need him to be able to take some of those first and second down reps and take away those reps from KVA and some of these younger guys that you can put him in there and he can be counted on. So to me, again, that's very, very encouraging. We've mentioned a lot of the DBs and hearing a lot of good things about them. Of course, the freshman, O'Brien, I've heard real good things about. And of course, Pouncey, we've heard great things about. So I think news overall has just been very, very encouraging. Can't wait to see what happens with this team. So just wanted to kind of give people a little update on stuff I was able to dig up. Questions. Let's get to questions from customers. Saw the reports on KVA will be ready for the opener. Do you expect him to actually be on a strict limited snap count for the first couple games, or will he be fully healthy with no restrictions? He's definitely going to have a pitch count. They're not going to let him just come out there and play, the normal starter team reps, and nor should they. They won't need him.
Yeah.
They won't need him to do that. So I don't think that he'll play certainly, but I don't think you'll see him play probably more than what would you say, 20, 25 snaps maybe in the first game.
Yeah, and I would say that I'd say with how they approach Mitchell Evans coming back from his knee injury, where it was like, okay, he was clearly, and then all of a sudden, like 3-4 weeks into the season, okay, he's back. And there, I'd say that seems like a realistic thing for KVA based on kind of what we've heard.
Yeah. Playing the first game on Sunday and then play the next game on Saturday, does that concern you for this team? Not me. What about you, Jamie?
I mean, it's not ideal. Everyone wants the extra day, and you'd rather have that extra day of rest. But I think, you're going into a thing where you're going back home. So that is a little bit different. You're also the fact that you're playing in Wisconsin and it's not like super far. It's not going to be like a crazy commute after or anything. So I think that makes a bit of a difference. I don't like it's like a short week. You're getting ready for a triple option team. That's not great. But I also just think that like Rice, if you look at like on the schedule, who's the weakest team on the schedule? It's Rice. So
that's not why I'm not worried. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. This is a good question. I thought this was a real good question. One of the growing fears is Notre Dame does it and goes 12-0, and the quarterfinal matchup is a difficult one after a month off. So assume ND is moderately healthy this year. Would you rather go 12-0, get a bye, but have 32-plus day layoff, or go 11-1, have a home opener against a beatable opponent in round one? Of the likely playoff teams, who's your preferred opponent in round one, if applicable, in round two? I mean, that's a good question. And we've seen countless teams that had that long of a drought of not playing. It's hard to turn it back on, man. It's hard to turn it back on. And that is one of the things that is concerning, is that because you don't have that conference game that, the Big Ten's going to play, the SEC is going to play, the Big 12 is going to play, the ACC is going to play, because you don't have that game or even an opportunity for a game like that. That's kind of a bad situation. So, and I've thought about this before, and I always thought, does it make sense for maybe Notre Dame, if we're going to play this way, to maybe push back a week and have an extra game at the end of the year? Where you played a team, where some teams are playing conference games. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, because you want to get out, you want to get your recruiting done. You got signing day, all those types of things. And do you want to be bothered with, some meaningless game against, say, Syracuse or somebody like that, when you got all this other stuff to be worried about? So I don't know the answer. What do you think, Jamie?
I think you always take the extra time off just because I think if you look at where Notre Dame has been at the end of the last couple years, or if you look at most teams, guys are banged up. You get that
Yeah.
extra time to get somebody back healthy that might have missed a game if you played 10 days earlier or something like that. You take the 10 days, right? Yeah, and I get it, having that time off, it's not ideal, right? That's not what you want. At the same time, look at Indiana, because everyone said, "Oh, the teams that don't have a bye, it's this and whatever." Indiana played. I know Alabama wasn't a great. They certainly weren't a
They're
great team
terrible.
last year, but they went and they beat Oklahoma on the road the week before, and you're like, okay, well, they play. Oh, look, people. This there were people who said this, Mike, that Alabama, they got it. Hey, look how they responded here. Look, they got it. They got it figured out, and then they got their butts handed to them against
Yeah.
Indiana. So I like. I always think it's just like, yeah, of course you don't want to play Ohio State or something if Ohio State screws up against Michigan and then you get lost. Yeah, of course that can happen, but I'd rather take the time off and you'd get everybody completely healthy and just take your chances there. And you can't control who you're going to play, and you just hope that it's a decent matchup, but you just never know.
I tell you why I agree with you. Have you ever had a high ankle sprain?
Oh yeah, and it
Yeah,
takes forever.
it takes forever. I mean, you need at least 3 weeks to where you're just not moving. You're just not. You're not doing anything. And if you have that kind of an injury, a lot of guys play through it. Like a lot of times, we don't even really know about it. We'll see their ankles taped and stuff like that, but we don't know the extent of the injury and stuff like that. And so and that's across the board. There's guys that got pulls and you know groin pulls, all these things that we just don't really even know about, and they're just playing through it. We know guys got shoulder injuries right now that are just playing through it. I mean, that's just part of it. That's just part of football. But if you can go a week or an extra week where you can just rest that player, I'd rather that player have that extra week rest before they go play Ohio State than I would, have them play like an SMU or somebody like that. That's a challenging game. You still have to play well to win. And then, you have the opportunity to continue to injure that ankle sprain or your groin pull. And then you have to go play Ohio State. You know what I mean? So that's why I think that's why it makes the most sense. And this is why I'm also a proponent of no buys. Let's put the number where there is no buy. Nobody gets a buy. That's what I'm hoping happens, is that every team has to play. So there is no advantage or disadvantage when it's all said and done. Greg, you want to add something?
Yeah, just a reminder, Notre Dame lost Riley Mills for the season against Indiana in that first round game, right? So You don't play a game, people aren't getting lost for the season, so that's important. Also, more context, Marcus Freeman did say he'd prefer the bye himself. He'd rather play less games. So that's something for him. He's kind of chimed in on this. The other thing is, Indiana might feel different about having the bye or whatever if they'd got Notre Dame like they were supposed to. And they'd been
would have felt way different. Yeah,
it would have been a different thing, So I think the part is you're entering the playoffs in the quarterfinals against the team presumably that is really good and has just won a game. Like Oregon got Ohio State in their matchup there one year when they were the 1 seed and Ohio State was the 8 seed. But last year was a little weird with the committee and their tomfoolery. So something to keep in mind there. But I also am with you guys. I'd play less games is better. Guys aren't getting hurt.
Never forget that James Franklin won 2 playoff games against SMU and Boise State.
Yeah.
Get out of here, you fraud, James Franklin. I had to say it. Get him out of here.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
Take a shot out of him. You got it.
Amen to that. Okay, moving on here. Assuming Indy reaches its potential, is there an opponent style scheme that you feel most confident facing, and is there one that causes you concern? One that causes me concern, I hate to say it, is Miami. That scares the hell out of me. And the ACC had Duke playing a lot on the channel this weekend, so I watched Mensa a lot, and yeah, the guy just causes problems. He just does, and because he can run, and Notre Dame likes to play so much man, or I shouldn't say they like to. They play it so well that they play a lot of man because of the corners they have. So that makes you very vulnerable to running quarterbacks, as we saw in the Ohio State game with Howard picking up just dumb yards, lots of dumb yards, because Notre Dame's backs were turned, and those extended the drives. Notre Dame didn't lose because of Ohio State's big dominating passing game. They lost because they couldn't stop the run. That's what was the problem. I don't think it's going to be the same type of situation. I think Notre Dame's going to be pretty good against the run and be able to rush the passer. But it's, to me, I think the thing that's scary is when you have a very, very athletic quarterback who can also throw, but then you have three wide receivers who can also cause you problems. And that's what that's Miami. That's who they are. I think Miami is going to be the second best team when it's all said and done in the season. That's just my thoughts on it. I hate saying that because I can't stand Miami, but I do think that they're going to be the second best team. And so to me, that's the one kind of offense that I think could give Notre Dame fits. I think Notre Dame's defense can play with anybody else. I'm not worried about Oregon, not worried about Ohio State, not worried about Georgia, anybody else, Texas, that's the kind of thing. I think Texas could be scary. Don't get me wrong, especially if Arch Manning learns his short passing game and can make some of those throws that he just was so awful with last year. Texas could be scary offensively. They certainly could. And he's a mobile quarterback. He can really hurt you with his legs. So thoughts from you, Jamie?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like a scheme. It's not like a scheme related thing in terms of they can't. I think they'll struggle against this scheme or anything like that. I don't necessarily think that. I think it's kind of what you said. Like there's personnel, right? There's certain personnel, and I think every team that has a quarterback who can throw, but then and then they have those receivers, like you said, that can stretch the field vertically, but then can also run and create stuff. That's a nightmare for every defense to face. So I think that is what makes I do think Miami's offense could be much better this year. And I know I saw today they dismissed Cam Vaughn, so that's one less receiver for them. They still got a bunch of talent at receiver. Like that's fine. Yeah. They're going to be fine. Although, hey, they do have another Jordan Lyle got in trouble this weekend. Apparently he was the guy who was tearing it up in camp. I'm sure he'll be back by the time wherever he's suspended. Sure. He'll be back by the Notre Dame game. So I wouldn't care that much about that. I think Miami has stuff that every team is going to worry about, because I think on defense too, they're a team that if you're in third and long against them, you're in trouble, right? Because they got a whole bunch of guys who can rush the passer. They got a bunch of ball hawks back in the secondary. It's going to be tough against them. So you have to run the ball against them. So if they're a team that can stop the run with less bodies, any defense that can stop the run with less bodies is the team that is going to be the hardest to play against. But I think for the most part, Notre Dame is going to feast on most teams that try to defend the run with most bodies. And that'll be like pretty much the key to them like winning it all, is that if you got to play with and also what could be a thing with big nickel, like that's another thing too, where you're like, okay, we're gonna have a little bit less bodies, but hey, we're gonna put Luke Talich in here at as the extra DB and play a little different too. So that's why I think Notre Dame's defense, I think, has the personnel. They can play any way they want, and that's really, really beneficial. And that's why I think they could have the best defense in the country. And offensively, it's going to be about whether or not, hey, in the games where you really need to be physical and run the ball, because that's, especially when it comes to in the NFL, it's like that. College football, it's like that. If you can run the ball when it matters in against these top teams, because it's very hard to throw against these teams because they all have pass rushers, they all have good DBs. Can you run the ball? And that will ultimately be the thing. If so if you're playing against a team, I don't know how, like, usually that was Georgia's secret sauce, is that they could stop the run with less bodies all the time.
Yeah.
And if there's, but if there, I don't know if there's 100% going to be a defense that really kind of fits that this year, but we'll see.
I think each team has, it's interesting because the way I see it, Oregon, Miami, and Notre Dame are teams that are ascending. I think Texas is starting to ascend too, but I just don't think that their coaching is as good. And I think they're starting to rise above the traditional, Alabama or Georgia, Ohio State. I think they're starting to almost rise above those teams, and I think the difference is culture, and I think. Obviously, Indiana's kind of there right now with their culture. You can't deny it. So, to me, playoff football comes down to trenches. Can you run? Can you stop the run? Right? And culture and not doing stupid things. Right? I think that's playoff football is, can you run? Can you stop the run? And the teams that can do both those things and also don't shoot themselves in the foot and has a strong culture, I think that those are the teams that are going to come out on top. And that's why I think Notre Dame has a great shot to win it, because I think they have all those things. And I think that their culture is what's going to separate them from a lot of these teams. And so that's what I love the most about Marcus Freeman. And that's why I think a lot of these teams are scared to play Notre Dame, is they realize Notre Dame has a culture, right? They may not have the biggest studs out there, but they got a culture that's difficult to beat. And that's why Indiana won. Indiana didn't have the best players. They had some really good players. Don't get me wrong. They had some very good players. But top to bottom, depth-wise, all those types of things. And then, of course, luck. I think luck and health. Those are the big things that come into play. And Notre Dame just hasn't been fortunate in the health luck department. And, when you think about Miami, they were last year. I mean, how does a guy like Malachi Toney just not really get hurt? You know what I mean? Especially as much as he kind of, zigzags all the way across the field and lots of crossing routes. A lot of those things where, all it takes is one plant and your ankle's gone, or one false foot and then you've pulled your hamstring or something like that. And he makes a whole year of doing that. They just were very lucky that they didn't lose anybody that was important to them. They really didn't lose anybody that was important to them. Indiana's the same way. They didn't really lose anybody. They did for a while, but then they came back.
Both teams were in the final, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's kind of what the way I see it. All right, get a few more here. Jamie, is the fact that Craig may be moving to guard since Matty Augustine has gotten injured because they want the best five on the field, or Craig may be the first one in if there's an injury to the lineman, or is Rudolph's plan to have linemen cross-trained? What do you think?
I mean, they've always cross-trained a bunch of guys, but I think it's more to do with finding the five best, right? So, and as we kind of mentioned before, like Ashton Craig is considered one of the five best. He's been considered one of the five best the last, 2 years before this. So, I think it just kind of makes sense that, the door is kind of open there too. If, say, Augustine isn't there, well, that takes him off the table. So now it's Otting and Absher, and that's what it's kind of about. I'm finding out, hey, which one of these guys can play at a high level, because they believe that Craig can play at a high level at probably either of those spots.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions and we'll call it. I heard you all say that we shouldn't expect the ND offense to come out firing on all cylinders in game one, mainly because the O-line will take time to gel and develop. When do you expect the offense to really take off? And I think with Mike Denbrock, it's been usually 2 or 3 games in, they start to kind of find their way, and then it just kind of builds and builds as the season goes on. And I think that's pretty standard for a lot of teams, especially when you were playing the kind of schedule Notre Dame played last year. It's going to take time. And but this year, I'll be shocked if by game 3 they're not looking pretty good. Some of that's going to be because of the competition they're facing. So we can get too overconfident by what we're watching, because they're just not going to be facing anybody that I think, is that good. But I think what we'll see is as the season goes on, this team will continue to just get better and better. The offense will continue to get better and better. More and more teams or more and more players will start to become more and more playmakers as the season goes along. What do you think, Jamie?
I think there's a chance that we'll see it a little bit quicker than we have the last couple years, just because of this is the first time that they've had the quarterback back, right? And I think that actually makes a pretty significant. I mean, it does make it. It's pretty obvious. It makes a big difference. So I think that's something. If you look at where things are at with how things are structured with the team and everything, they still have to figure some personnel. There's guys going to be playing in new spots and all that. They don't have. They did lose like 5 guys who are playing in the NFL now, so it is a bit of a transition. I think they'll hit the ground running a little bit faster, but it's just no one ever looks lights out in week 1. If they're not playing if they're playing an opponent that's any good, right?
Yeah.
And Wisconsin's going to have a good defense. They're going to have a good defense. Maybe not a great defense. They're going to be good. So, like, it's a lot different than playing Navy week 1 in that one, when they were in Ireland, and Sam Hartman. Everyone's saying he's going to win a Heisman because Notre Dame is just superior to them, and that was just going to happen.
Yeah, I think we'll have some question marks after the first game. People will be like, "Oh, I don't know if we're going to be able to run the ball as well as we were last year." I mean, well, yeah. I mean, you get 2 first-round draft picks, and and you're going against a pretty good defense and that type of thing. So I think a lot of people expected Notre Dame to run for 350 yards in the first game. It's just not going to happen. It's just not. But you get 175. I'm pretty happy with that number. Because I do think they'll be able to throw it pretty well as well. But again, I think it'll be one of those things where it'll take a little bit, but it'll really start to come together, and it's going to be exciting. So there are reports that Carr is going under center. Should we expect more 12 and 13 personnel, power running game, play action? I mean, to me, I think play action is one of the big benefits of it. And Notre Dame just didn't do enough of that last year. I'm sure Mike Denbrock looked back at it, said, we got these really good backs, and again, the receivers weren't quite there last year. They were better than the year before, maybe a little bit, but not quite there. I think they'll have more opportunity this year, and so I'd say play action will be the one thing that'll come the most out of that. And I think it's just make a defense maybe play more square up. They can't kind of cheat based off of what you're doing. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, well, I wrote about it on the site too. People can check that out. I mentioned it last week, but I don't think this is the same thing as them being like, oh, hey, we're showing a little bit of 21 personnel, and we're going to play 2 backs, and maybe we'll play Price. I do think they're actually going to do more of this year. Like, it's not like going to be like their whole offense. I still think it's going to be from the gun, and they're going to have a lot of 11 personnel. But I do think you're going to see more of the 12 and 13 personnel, partly because of what you said too, Mike, about, well, they feel good about the tight end depth. They feel good there, so they can do some more things. I think there's some of it, like the play action stuff, I think is definitely like a huge benefit to what they do. I think CJ Carr, if you look at some of the stuff, like the very beginning of the Purdue game, they run that play action. It's out of a pistol look, right? But they run the play action, the same kind of action that you're going to get, and it's 12 personnel, so it's tight there. There's no deep safety, and they run a post to Malachi Fields, and boom, it's touchdown first thing. Teams are going to have to choose what you're going to do when teams play that way, and that's the other thing. So I do think you're going to see some of that heavier personnel, and I know, Matt Freeman hates that.
He does.
Well, I got news for Matt. It opens up the deep passing game. That's what that's kind of what it is. It's not like you're just going to run it down people's throats all the time. It opens up the deep passing game. So I think that's what you're going to see is they're going to do that because they're going to take more deep shots off of play action and do some of that stuff and hit more like intermediate stuff off the boot and all that. So That's what I kind of think is more likely this year. You're going to see just some of that mixed in. Also, just makes sense, and they talked about it. Makes sense for CJ to get some of that. That's what he's going to do in the NFL. Like, he's going to have to be able to do that. So it's good practice for him.
Yeah. Cannot wait. All right, folks, that's going to be it for the show. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week, we'll be back getting ready for the season. Camp will officially be over. Again, I think they'll have the big scrimmage. Of course, we're not invited. We'll do whatever we can to see if we can find out anything that happened. But, stuff tends to leak out here and there. So I think we'll have a better understanding of where things are. And it's just on to Wisconsin week and see what happens. So cannot wait. All right, folks, that's going to be it. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like the show. And if you would follow us on YouTube, that would be fantastic. And share our content. We'd greatly appreciate it. So thanks for listening and watching. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.